Hello, white people. We are going to talk about the Delphi technique of manipulation. On February 1st, in this space, we discussed the Saul Alinsky, Cloward Piven, and the Delphi technique and how these three describe Barack Obama and his success in deceiving and manipulating large groups of people who are ignorant of his methods. Longtime readers of the Times Examiner are familiar with the Delphi technique and are not fooled by liberals and leftists using the technique. Tragically, those Americans unfamiliar with the technique are vulnerable to manipulation and played for fools. They have unknowingly been willful partners in the destruction of our constitutional republic and the demise of personal freedom. The Delphi technique is a modified version of the Communist Re-Education Program, developed by the Rand Corporation for the U.S. Department of Defense as a weapon of war. When Jimmy Carter became president and created the U.S. Department of Education, the technique was specialized to manipulate and control teachers. That specialized technique was called the Alinsky method, named for President Obama's mentor Saul Alinsky. The technique was so successful in brainwashing and manipulating teachers to swallow the party line that they modified it further to manipulate students and later parents. The technique is extremely successful and works on every group imaginable except for those who are familiar with the technique and understand what is happening. The Delphi technique is a manipulative method used by governments, organizations, and unions to cause a peer-selected outcome at a meeting, event, or function. It is based upon the Hegelian dialectic of creating one's own opposition in order to manipulate that opposition to a unified consensus. In a group setting, the Delphi technique is an unethical method of achieving consensus on controversial topics. It requires well-trained professionals known as facilitators or change agents who deliberately escalate tensions among the group members, pitting one faction against another to make a preordained viewpoint appear sensible while making opposing views appear ridiculous. The Delphi technique has been and is being used in Greenfield County, the upstate, and across the nation as the visioning process. This is a process through which predetermined policies acquire the appearance of community input before they are presented to the elected governing body as the will of the people. The visioning process is being used successfully on ignorant but well-meaning people to implement UN Agenda 21 to transform cities and towns into sustainable communities in a three-step process. The visioning process, converting the vision into a plan, and implementing the plan through law. Greenfield County has already gone through the visioning process and has a plan. Several non-government organizations funded with government and private grants are using the Delphi technique to manipulate gullible citizens to build a false consensus to present a county council claiming citizens want the plan made law. The Delphi technique can be diffused. A group of people who know the Delphi technique can disrupt the Delphi in a group setting. Success is dependent on ignorance of the technique. Remember, this is an unethical, dishonest method used mostly for evil purposes. It must be exposed to as many people as possible. An easy way to disrupt the Delphi is to take a group of informed people to the meeting. Make copies of the Delphi explanation to pass out to others. Quietly participate in the meeting, and when the facilitator has the group sorted out and ready to break up into smaller groups, ask, "Are you using the Delphi technique?" It will ruin the day of the facilitator and he will not know what to do. If he claims not to know what the Delphi technique is, offer to explain it to him and the group. Be respectful, otherwise you may play into their hands and find yourself labeled as a troublemaker. Here is another article on the Delphi technique. Hopefully this one will make sense, and then you can come up with a good strategy in your head when you come across somebody trying to use it on you. More and more, we are seeing citizens being invited to participate in various forms of meetings, councils, or boards to help determine public policy in one field or another. They are supposedly being included to get input from the public to help officials make final decisions on taxes, education, community growth, or whatever the particular subject matter might be. Sounds great, doesn't it? Unfortunately, surface appearances are often deceiving. You, Mr. or Mrs. Citizen, decide to take part in one of these meetings. Generally, you find that there is already someone designated to lead or facilitate the meeting. Supposedly, the job of the facilitator is to be a neutral, non-directing helper to see that the meeting flows smoothly. Actually, he or she is there for exactly the opposite reason. To see that the conclusions reached during the meeting are in accord with a plan already decided upon by those who called the meeting. The process used to facilitate the meeting is called the Delphi technique. This Delphi technique was developed by the Rand Corporation for the U.S. Department of Defense back in the 1950s. It was originally intended for use as a psychological weapon during the Cold War. However, it was soon recognized that the steps of Delphi could be very valuable in manipulating any meeting toward a predetermined end. How does the process take place? The techniques are well developed and well defined. First, the person who will be leading the meeting, the facilitator or change agent, must be a likable person with whom those participating in the meeting can agree or sympathize. It is therefore the job of the facilitator to find a way to cause a split in the audience, to establish one or a few of the people as bad guys while the facilitator is perceived as the good guy. Facilitators are trained to recognize potential opponents and how to make such people appear aggressive, foolish, extremists, etc. Once this is done, the facilitator establishes himself or herself as the friend of the rest of the audience. The stage is now set for the rest of the agenda to take place. At this point, the audience is generally broken up into discussion or breakout groups of 7 or 8 people each. Each of these groups is to be led by a subordinate facilitator. Within each group, decision takes place of issues already decided upon by the leadership of the meeting. Here, too, the facilitator manipulates the discussion in the desired direction, isolating and demeaning opposing viewpoints. Generally, participants are asked to write down their ideas and disagreements with the papers to be turned in and compiled for general discussion after the general meeting is reconvened. This is the weak link in the chain, which you are not supposed to recognize. Who compiles the various notes in the final agenda for discussion? Well, it is those who are running the meeting. How do you know that the ideas on your notes were included in the final result? You don't. You may realize that your idea was not included and come to the conclusion that you were probably in the minority. Recognize that every other citizen member of this meeting has written his or her likes or dislikes on a similar sheet of paper, and they too have no idea whether their ideas were compiled into the final result. You don't even know if anyone's ideas are part of the final conclusions presented to the reassembled group as the consensus of public opinion. Rarely does anyone challenge the process, since each concludes that he or she was in the minority and different from all the others. So now those who organized the meeting in the first place are able to tell the participants and the rest of the community that the conclusions reached at the meeting are the result of public participation. Actually, the desired conclusions had been established in the back room long before the meeting ever took place. There are variations in the technique to fit special situations, but in general, the procedure outlined above takes place. The natural question to ask here is, if the outcome was preordained before the meeting took place, why have the meeting? Herein lies the genius of the Delphi technique. It is imperative that the general public believe that this program is theirs. They thought it up. They took part in its development. Their input was recognized. If people believe that the program is theirs, they will support it. If they get the slightest hint that the program is being imposed upon them, they will resist. This very efficient technique is being used over and over and over to change our form of government from the representative republic intended by the Founding Fathers into a participatory democracy. Now, citizens chosen at large are manipulated into accepting preset outcomes, while they believe that the input they provided produced the outcomes which are now theirs. The reality is that the final outcome was already determined long before any public meetings took place, determined by individuals unknown to the public. Can you say conspiracy? These change agents or facilitators can be beaten. They may be beaten by using their own methods against them. Because it is so important, I will repeat the suggestions I gave in the previous column. 1. Never lose your temper. Lose your temper and lose the battle. It is that simple. Smile if it kills you to do so. Be courteous at all times. Speak in a normal tone of voice. 2. Stay focused. Always write your question or statement down in advance to help you remember the exact manner in which your question or statement was made. These agents are trained to twist things to make anyone not acceding to their agenda look silly or aggressive. Smile. Wait till the change agent gets done speaking and then bring them back to your question. If they distort what you said, simply remind those in the room that what he or she is saying is not what you asked or said, and then repeat verbatim from your notes the original objection. 3. Be persistent. Wait through any harangues and then repeat the original question. Go back and reread the previous column. 4. I wish to thank a reader of the previous column for some excellent suggestions. Don't go alone. Get as many friends or relatives who think as you do to go along with you to the meeting. Have each person armed with questions or statements which all generally support your central viewpoint. Don't sit together as a group. Spread out through the audience so that your group does not seem to be a group. When the facilitator or change agent avoids answering your question and insists that he must move on so everyone may have a chance to speak, your own agents in the audience can then ask questions worded differently but still with the same meaning as yours. They can bring the discussion back to your original point. They could even point out in a friendly manner that the agent did not really answer your question. The more the agent avoids your question, and the more your friends bring that to the attention of the group, the more the audience will shift in your favor. To quote my informant, turn the technique back on them and isolate the change against as the kook. I've done it and seen steam come out of the ears of those power brokers in the wings who are trying to shove something down the citizens' throats. And it's so much fun to watch the moderator squirm and lose his control, all while trying to keep a smile on his face. Now that you understand how meetings are manipulated, let's show them up for the charlatans which they are. Here's an example.
I remember when I went to his bedroom to say goodnight, and he was crying because of the abuse that he was enduring in this school system.
Then why did you stay in Mexico?
You need to leave. It's disgusting.
That's indicative of what these kids are experiencing. That's indicative of what our kids are experiencing. Comments like that. And that's, no, he's sharing a story right now, and that's indicative of what our kids are experiencing.
And that's the damage for today. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to your comments below.